Okay, so we're on to seals. Now, for you guys as wild swimmers, the big impact is potentially an interface between the sea and the land. And that is because many of the species that are most beautiful around the coastline spend time on land as much as in the sea. In the case of the seals, they're very much protected now, although they weren't so in the past. And so, we need to be aware of that. But they're an important part of our native fauna. Next slide, please. So we have two types of seals in the UK. The grey seal, and Britain is the epicenter of grey seals. Something like 40% of the world's population in the UK, 95% of the EU population in the UK, and they are a substantial creature. This is a big bull here, hauled out on a rock at low water, and they can be 300 kilos. It's a big, hefty animal. Next slide, please. Female grey seal, as you might expect, much better looking than the male, and this lovely area of pattern on the neck. The gorget is used for photo-identifying individual animals. This one's just hauling out, got her feathers up out of the water because they lose heat through them. And they haul out during the day, especially at low water, when they can often be well away from the water. So they are vulnerable when they're hauled out, but they're hauled out just for food, to warm up and to rest. Next slide, please. And this is a common or harbour seal. And these guys are smaller, with this little, what I think looks like a sort of puppy face. And very, very pretty. This one's on the skin. Next slide, please. The difference with them perhaps is that grey seals are probably more offshore, and harbour seals are more inshore. They're the ones that you'll find in very sheltered waters. Sometimes, though, there's a crossover. And here you've got a grey seal female in the foreground and two harbour seals in the background. So they do interface. And for those of you down south, they're now moving slowly but surely further west again. So harbour seals now have been seen in the River Exe, where, as in the past, that was something we certainly never saw when I was living down there. And in Poole Harbour, for example. Grey seals west of that, down around Cornwall. Big population in Pembrokeshire. In Scotland, you're looking at the Cheshire Isles, you're looking at the Monmouths, you're looking at North Rona. So there are some real important horn-out sites in the Isle of May as well. So, very important habitat for seals around the UK. Next slide, please. Seals are incredibly vigilant. Sometimes, as you can see here, they haul out on beaches, and there'll be seals piled up on each other sleeping, but there'll always be one or two on the lookout. And they have incredible senses. They will pick people up from very long distances. Bright colors, noise, many of these things, and smell, they smell very, very well indeed. So they can pick up on people being around. And although you'll see trip boats that go out regularly to habituated to carefully handled boats, and therefore they are less likely to be disturbed, but you turn up on your kayak and they spook. So why is that? Next slide, please. Well, seals have a phenomenal sense of smell, and they'll first smell something, then hear, and then see an approach. So wind direction, so a wind blowing onshore from a boat traveling offshore, or people on a cliff with the wind blowing down into a seal haul-out site, will be picked up. And bright clothing on boats, oftentimes sensible operators tell people on the boat to keep quiet, stay down low in the boat, and if they've got really bright clothing on, maybe take it off or turn it inside out, because it causes less disturbance. So they're all factors. Difficult thing, because sometimes they take a long time to settle down after a disturbance event, and you might turn up an hour or so later, seals just take off, but you don't know what happened a couple of hours ago. So you have to use fieldcraft and watch from a careful distance and keep down low so you're not obvious. So disturbance will be increased if there are big groups of people downwind where it's quiet, and so any sound will travel and carry. And I saw some video film this last year of a rigid inflatable boat traveling offshore at sensible speed, and some seals ashore were absolutely panicked by it, and they must have been 600 meters away. It was extraordinary. There was just a light onshore wind, and the noise came in, and it disturbed them. So don't be surprised if they appear spooky. That's because they are. Next slide, please. So there are vulnerable seal growths. Now, as I mentioned earlier, when seals haul out, they often haul out as the tide is falling. And when the tide falls completely, especially in places like Bristol Channel, for example, or even up here where tidal ranges can be really big, animals hauled out ashore are very vulnerable. If they're on beaches, if they get stampeded, they may have to travel across rocks for considerable distances, suffering injuries. Pregnant females are very much at risk here, for obvious reasons. Pounding over rocks, launching themselves off high water rocks is especially if they get separated. Then if they get separated from their pups, this is why a lot of pups have to be rescued, but also too, it does have an effect on the viability of pups and their ability to survive. And juveniles, surprisingly, because they're still pretty basic and not terribly good at learning their way of looking after themselves until they've got a few years on, and they're not carrying the fat reserves that they need to see them through lean times. So disturbance of those animals can be a serious problem. So there are a number of things to think about here. One is, if you think in terms of the seasons, in the Hebrides, for example, I think the pupping season is pretty late, it's sort of September onwards, but you'll have pregnant females before that. So be very careful to pick, if you're near known haul-out sites, and it's worth finding out where haul-out sites are, and at those times of year, just avoid them, because that then will let the animals get through their natural cycle with as little disturbance as possible. Certainly be very, very careful in bays and places where there are seals hauled out, particularly can suffer injuries. So pick high water. Don't pick the dodgy times of the year where the seals could be affected, and enjoy them when you see them. Next slide, please. So what does disturbance look like? This is a very simple example of it, and it shows roughly what we call. Now, this is a small group of harbour seals in Loch Scavaig on Skye, and they're hauled out on the rocks here, as you can see, and they're just looking around. You can see there's a young one at the back there, fast asleep. Others are just dozing, but two of them have started to look at something, and that something is us. So they are looking out and they're wondering, what's going on? Is this a threat? And is it going to cause any disturbance? Now, trip boats go in and out of Loch Scavaig all the time, right the way past this haul out, and never bother the animals, because they're well handled, they keep quiet, and the seals have got used to those boats, they recognize them. They don't recognize anyone else. So when you're new, when you're on a paddleboard, when you're in a kayak particularly, or potentially. Next slide, please. And you can see here, by now everybody's awake and everybody's wondering what's going on. And this is what we call the tripwire moment. This is when If you move away quietly, the seals might settle down again and relax, or potentially you disturb their rest, they'll go into the water. Some of them, particularly not so much here, but in water, they might become injured. And so this is the moment where you've got to make the decision. Are we bothering these animals, or should we move away? And if you're in any doubt, move away. Don't. And then this is what happens when they start going. And this isn't even a bad event, by the way. This is relatively benign. In places like West Cornwall on the North Cornwall coast, where there is a big range of tide, seals tombstone off high rocks, and they almost always suffer bad injuries. Next slide, please.